Well, good morning to all. It's good to see everyone here this morning. I think we have a lot of people traveling. We wish them safety. Okay, Helen told me this morning that her daughter is showing maybe a little bit of improvement, so maybe there's some light at the end of that tunnel. We're grateful for that. Would you bow with me as we begin our class? Father, we thank you for yet another opportunity to meet and study your word. We have many of our number that need your care and attention. Physically, we just know that a lot of us are not doing well. But we're thankful for the good news that we have about Helen and Paul's daughter, that she is doing better. We just pray that that will continue, that there will be a full and complete recovery. Be with us now as we enter into a study of your words. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay, last week we ended up in Mark chapter 10, and the last discussion that we had regarded the good news, the blessings that we are to enjoy in this life as Christians. The next topic that Mark addresses is that for the third time, he addresses the things that are going to occur shortly. He is on his way to Jerusalem for the final time. We're in the last really few weeks of his life. And for the third time, he addresses the things that are going to happen. Begin the reading in verse 32. Now they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. And we're not told specifically why they were amazed or why they were afraid. I'd like to kind of come back to that as we go through this discussion of what they're being told. Then he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them the things that would happen to him. Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. Now, there's a lot of things that we're told right there in that sentence, and really it's in the form of prophecy. He's telling them specific things that are going to happen. They will mock him, scourge him, spit on him, and kill him. And the third day, he will rise again. And what I've done is I've gone through all of Matthew, Mark, and Luke's account. Each of them have three specific instances where Jesus tells his disciples what's going to happen to him. And there's different things in each of those. What I'd like to do is kind of give a quick summary of all that he has told them. And since we've started in Mark, or since we're studying Mark, I've gone through and listed those things in each of those accounts. First account in Mark chapter 8, he says that he will suffer many things. He will be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes. He will be killed and rise in 3 days. The second time that he talks to them about that is in Mark 9. He also mentions that he will be betrayed and that the hands of men will kill him. And here in this reading, we add to that, it will happen in Jerusalem. He will be delivered to Gentiles. They will mock him, scourge him, and spit on him. Now, here Mark also adds they will kill him and rise on the third day. That's pretty typical through all of them. Almost all of the accounts mention that he will be killed and rise on the third day. There is no mention in Mark's account of the fact that it will occur in Jerusalem until this third event. However, in Matthew's account, the first time he adds the fact that it will occur in Jerusalem. That's the only new thing that's added in Mark's first account. Second account, there's really nothing new. The third account is that he will be condemned to death. Now, I added that condemned to death because that implies some sort of a process, a trial, or some sort of a formal event that will result in his condemnation. Now, we know that about the trial. That account also mentions the fact that Jesus will die by crucifixion, that he will be crucified. Luke's first two accounts don't really add anything new. Everything that he mentioned in the first two are also included in the other accounts. But in his third account, he says that all prophecy will be fulfilled. All prophecy will be fulfilled. Now that opens up really a major study if we really wanted to do it. The majority of the things that we know in the Old Testament related to prophecy regarding Jesus' death is found in Psalm 118 and Isaiah chapter 53. But in those two cases, and there are others, but those two have a great deal to say about the manner of Jesus' death. Luke also adds the word insulted that is not found in any of the other accounts. Now, that, what I've done this morning is all New King James. Obviously, if you go to other accounts, there will be different words used, but same meaning. So we see a great deal of prophecy that these disciples know about. They know what's going to happen when they go to Jerusalem. So now let's think about the terms that they will be amazed. If we put ourselves in the position of those men, I think we would be amazed. I know I would be, just in the fact that Jesus is still going to Jerusalem, unforced, voluntarily. Not only that, but it says here that he's going before them. He's leading the way. He's not sending somebody out to scout out the situation. He's going first, and if you realize the things that he's going to face when he gets to Jerusalem, I think I would be amazed. I would also be a little fearful of my own personal involvement in what's going to happen. Will it spill over to me? Will I be able to stay strong and stay true, knowing the trials that everyone's going to be going through? I think the fact that they were amazed and afraid would be pretty human emotions at this point in time. Any questions or thoughts? It's a pretty amazing event here.
You know, Jim, that's when God picked his only begotten son for this big job. This was a big thing. And just like when Job going to and fro, God knew that Job wasn't going to let him down. And Jesus was not going, no ordinary man couldn't have done what Jesus done. No ordinary man just couldn't have done what Jesus done. He wasn't going to back down. And he said, not my will, Father, but thine will be done. So he knew that Jesus was going to complete the mission.
Yeah. We have another one over here, I think, too, Paul. You know, sometimes I think we sort of gloss over the fact that that phrase is only begotten Son. Down here with Mr. Meadows.
Well, I'm going to kind of throw a little bit of a wrench just because it's Sunday. We know that the way the Bible was written, these separations between thoughts are not necessarily there. So it's possible that the statement in 32 that they were amazed and afraid has more to do with what is right before it in the section where he's talking about how to get to heaven and giving up all and all of that. They were amazed at how they were, the people were going to, be saved, and also possibly afraid that maybe they weren't going to be, able to do it right. So
yeah, I certainly won't throw cold water on that. If you look back on everything that's happened, just simply his power to heal, to perform miracles, that would be that would be a source of amazement. Certainly won't object to looking backwards to explain the amazement and the fear. Good point. Anything else?
I think they were also appalled, and the reason being is because they had been with him and they had seen all the miracles that he had done. So they felt like he had the power not to let this happen.
Oh, I think that's a great point, in that on the one hand, they recognize Jesus as divine. They recognize his divinity and what God is going to allow himself to be treated the way he's going to be treated. I think that's what you're saying. And that created consternation among the people, and we see that. That's just not what they expected, nor what they wanted in a God. Okay, good points. Okay, let's move on to verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him saying, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." They're asking him to grant a wish, a desire, without even telling them what it is. And he said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said, "Grant us that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your glory." They obviously are still expecting somewhat of an earthly kingdom. They're expecting an organization similar to what they have on earth, that there are kings and rulers, and they have specific lieutenants that carry out their desires. But Jesus said to them, "You did not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They said to him, We are able. Now, do you think they really understood what he was saying? I don't know. So Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the baptism I am baptized with, you will be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared." In some ways, they did participate in the same trials that Jesus went through. We know that James suffered martyrdom. He was killed by Herod. We know that all of the apostles were whipped. They were told not to teach. They went ahead teaching, and they were, as a group, punished. When we add Paul to the mix, then we certainly know a lot of hardships that he encountered in his life. So in some way, they did suffer some of the same things that Jesus did. But what about this concept, but to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give? Was it really his to give? You know, in the big picture, we all have freedom of choice. They had freedom of choice. That place is prepared, but it's going to be given to those who do God's will. They had that freedom of choice, just like we do. So in that sense, it was not his to grant, because the people have to do God's will to be deserving of that entrance into heaven. And that's not specifically addressing the concept of being the greatest. We'll get into that a little bit later. But it does address the fact that it's Jesus' place to make the preparation, to prepare that place. It's up to us, as it was to them, to do the things that are necessary to receive that reward. When the 10 heard it, they began to be greatly displeased with James and John. Human emotions all the way around. They wanted to be first and foremost. The others don't want them to be first and foremost. They're taking their place. But Jesus called them to himself and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them." Now, Jesus is using this earthly kingdom organization to make his point. You know, this really is what the disciples wanted. They wanted to be first in that organization. "Yet it shall not be so among you, but whoever desires to be great among you shall be your servant." It's really turning the standards by which we measure success upside down. The great ones are going to be the servants, not the ones being served. "And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Just a total summary of the purpose of Jesus' coming. He was coming to be a slave in the sense that he is giving his all for us, as a ransom for us, so that we might have that reward. Okay, thoughts or questions or ideas on that topic? We've only got one more. Oh, Elsie has one.
I want to back up on this kingdom, the type of kingdom in which they were looking for.
Okay, can you get it a little?
They had reason to think that when they look back in prophecy, other than Isaiah and Psalms, to think that it was going to be a material kingdom. You know, when we go to Daniel 2:44, you know, we see there, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
Yeah.
If he's going to have a kingdom, and it's going to stand forever, why would he die and suffer?
What was that last phrase again?
Why would he die and suffer? That's the way they were
Oh,
thinking.
why would he? Yeah.
They was looking for a kingdom that's going to last forever.
Now,
It
they
can't last forever if it doesn't begin. He's going to die. And they was not comprehending that he would be raised on the third day
Yeah, and we,
at this point,
yeah,
even though he
I
raised
think that's-
Lazarus later on and a few others.
yeah.
But
That's a
raising
good,
himself, that God raised him up from the dead.
yeah.
But they were looking for a material kingdom, and they had a right to do that. But they didn't have all the prophecy, understand all the prophecy, the spiritual part of it. They understood the physical portion, but not the spiritual.
Yeah, I think they had a measure of understanding of the death. They understood the death. They did not understand the resurrection. You know, we're told that in John when they're standing at the tomb. They did not have that understanding. And they were expecting, as all of them were, a earthly kingdom. And that is what's in view here. That's what they're expecting. That's what they're wanting to be a part of. The spiritual understanding is going to come in stages, and it's not going to be complete until they really see that empty tomb. Okay?
Yes.
We have one more healing miracle in Mark before we actually get to Jerusalem, and that begins in verse 46. Now they came to Jericho. As he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And here, this man is referring to the earthly lineage of Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, Be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. Throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Then Jesus said to him, Go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. Jesus has made that statement a couple of other times in our study. Your faith has made you well. Each time there has been an action on the part of that person being healed to make that come true. You know, the woman with the issue of blood, he told her that her faith had made her well. But her faith made her perform an action that was to go touch Jesus' garment. Here, Bartimaeus' faith made him call out to Jesus. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. A couple of things that are different to the typical miracle of healing or receiving sight that Jesus has performed. One is that he is not told to keep it quiet. Most of the other healings, with the one exception being the man that had the demon driven out at the tomb, were told, don't tell anyone. You know, Jesus did not want to incite trouble, so he asked them to keep it quiet. And also, this man wanted to follow Jesus. The man that was healed, had the demon driven out at the tomb, wanted to follow Jesus, and he wouldn't let him. But here he did. I think we'll see as we go through that Jesus is finished with the keeping things secret. He's going to be more open. He's going to be more challenging to the powers that be. And we're going to see them go on the defensive somewhat. But Jesus is on the way to Jerusalem for his death. And he is really not keeping things quiet anymore. He's doing it more openly. Okay? Anything on that? Okay.
I think it's interesting to see how he's been talking to them, and they're expecting an earthly kingdom, and we know that his kingdom was to be spiritual. That's what he came for. And it ties in. He's been doing miracles, healing people, and they see that it's an earthly healing. But what's interesting is he's told them he came to be a ransom for many, and he's talking spiritual. And as he tells all these, because of your faith, well, spiritually, we also have to have that faith. We are spiritually blind and lame, just like they were. Physically, we are spiritually. And it ties in that we must have that faith in Jesus spiritually to inherit that kingdom that he is establishing. Even in John, it said that he did these healings that they might believe that he was who he said he was.
Yeah, it's interesting that I think there were either 4 or 5 miracles of receiving sight in all of the Gospels. And, you know, Jesus is the light of the world, and here we are with that many, and there's probably more of those kinds of healings than any others, that they're receiving sight. They're receiving that physical light and it's given by the person that's called the light of the world. Again, using physical things to illustrate and make spiritual points. Okay? Okay.
About him being open with everything. He did it openly. He didn't want to conceal it, so to speak. He allowed them to tell it. The drums have begun to beat. He's marching towards the cross. This was timing. He was timing this thing. He knew the exact time in which he were to hang on the cross. So he made sure the timing was right. So he was increasing the tempo, so to speak, marching towards the cross.
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps why he began to not really care in a sense, because this thing was timed by God. So he just increased the tempo, and it seemed as though he was kind of making them angry at this point, antagonized them to a degree. And in doing so, he would be marching faster to the cross where he could die at the proper time.
Yeah, he is definitely increasing the tempo of events. Instead of trying to hold everything back, hold the enemies back, he's now pushing them. And he's going to do some very public things like cleansing the temple. That's really going to get their attention. Okay, let's start chapter 11. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem, to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, and he said to them, before I read that, he's going to make Bethany pretty much his headquarters for the next few days. He's going to be going back and forth from Bethany to Jerusalem. Bethany is the home of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. And he's going to make that his headquarters for these last few days. Go into the village opposite you, and as soon as you have entered it, you will find a colt tied on which no one has sat. Loose it and bring it, and if anyone says to you, "Why are you doing this?" say, "The Lord has need of it," and immediately he will send it here. Now this colt is also the subject of prophecy. Zechariah 9:9 states that he will ride into Jerusalem on a colt. And it's interesting that this colt has never been ridden. It kind of calls to mind the sacrifices that were to be offered, that were going to be unblemished, untried. No one has sat on it. Think of what the men that are going into the village to get this colt must be thinking, that they're going in, and in their mind, they're going in to steal a colt. You know, they have no title to it. They have no right to it. She's going to be tied there, and they're going to go up and untie it and bring it to Jesus. He tells them, don't worry about it. All you have to do is, when they ask you, is say, the Lord has need of it, and immediately he will send it here. So they went their way, found the colt, tied by the door outside on the street, and loosed it. But some of those who stood there said to them, "What are you doing loosing the colt?" They spoke to them just as Jesus had commanded, so they let them go. Then they brought the colt to Jesus, threw their clothes on it, and sat on it. And many spread their clothes on the road, and others cut down leafy branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Then those who went before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Quote from Psalm 118. Now just think of the contrast between his entry into Jerusalem. He's exalted. The people are excited. They're approving. They're making his way paved with palm leaves. And instead of shouting, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, in just a few weeks or a few days, the multitude is going to be shouting, crucify him, crucify him. An amazing contrast. And Jesus went into Jerusalem and into the temple. So when he had looked around at all things, the hour was already late, and he went out to Bethany with the 12. So he goes into Jerusalem, but it's late at night. He looks around. We don't know if he went into the temple at all, but it's late, so he goes back to Bethany to spend the night. Verse 12. Now the next day, when they had come out from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing from afar a fig tree having leaves, he went to see if perhaps he could find something on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. In response, Jesus said to it, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again." And his disciples heard it. And we're going to see later on where they see this fig tree that's withered. Now, I don't fully understand this one, okay? I can see the image of Jesus walking up to a tree and not finding something to eat. He's finding something that's unfruitful when he has need of it. Say that again. He's finding something unfruitful when he has need of it. I can see that image. I can see the lesson in that. The complicating factor is when he says that it was not the season for figs. Now, if somebody can put that into context, I would love to hear it. The overall picture, I think, is what we've said, that the tree was unfruitful when Jesus had need of it, and that tree is going to be destroyed. That tree is going to be destroyed. So they passed by this tree, and Jesus has said, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again." So they came to Jerusalem. Then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. Then he taught, saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of thieves"? Now, that is a quote from both Isaiah and Jeremiah, Isaiah 56 and Jeremiah 7. And the scribes and chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his teaching. When evening had come, he went out of the city. This is kind of parallel to a part of the parable of the sower. Here, the people are blinded by the idea of making money. They're blinded to the real purpose of the temple. Let's look at Matthew chapter 13. Verse 22. Now he who receives seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the deceitfulness of riches. That's what's going on here in the temple. That's what's happened to a part of the temple that's devoted to the buying and selling of the sacrificial animals. But it chokes the word and he becomes unfruitful. That love of money chokes the word and they become unfruitful. Thought that was kind of an interesting parallel to something that we spent a fair amount of time on in this class, is the parable of the sower. But this is something that was done obviously openly. This was a direct challenge to the powers that be that control the temple. Now in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, remembering, said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you cursed has withered away. It's gone. So Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God, for assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and that you will have them. The power of prayer. Also, I think we need to think back onto something else that we talked about the last couple of weeks, is that with Jesus, with God, everything is possible. We can't do it on our own, but with God, everything is possible. If we believe truly and have faith, anything is possible. Doesn't say we're going to receive everything that we ask for, but everything is possible. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. Now there's a caveat. There's an action that's required of us. Pretty difficult caveat. It's hard sometimes for us to have that forgiveness in our hearts. Oh, it's easy to speak the words. Much more difficult to have the action. Okay, we'll stop. I'm trying to cover as much as we can. We got one more week for this. Okay? Then they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. We saw that as we were looking at the things that Jesus had told them was going to occur. And part of that was the chief priests, scribes, and elders. That's also the group that makes up the Sanhedrin, the ruling body. And they said to him, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority to do these things? The obvious thing that they were thinking was that he did not have authority from Caesar nor from the Sanhedrin. So how is he going to answer? What's he going to say? My authority is from God? We've already seen that as they consider that as blasphemy. So they think they have him in a trap. But Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one question. Then answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men? Answer me. Now, he really has turned the table on them. They thought they had him in an unanswerable question. But this is one that they can't really resolve. They reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But if we say from men, they feared the people, for all counted John to have been a prophet. Indeed, so they answered and said to Jesus, we do not know. Now, in Luke's account of this, he makes the statement that the people will stone us if they answer in the second part. The people will stone us. Now, this points out the dilemma that the enemies of Jesus have. The multitudes, the common people, are supporters of Jesus. It's the rulers, the people in authority, the people that have a position are against Jesus. And they're the ones that are trying to stop him. And they have a major problem in doing that because they're going against so many of the common, ordinary people. Then Jesus answered and said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Neither will I tell you. You won't tell me, I won't tell you. Okay. Just a minute.
Well, I don't care. According to the scriptures in the book of Isaiah, many don't realize that why these things happened to Jesus. Isaiah 53, verse 5, but he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. I was at a congregation last Sunday, and they were saying that Jesus' prayers was not answered. When he said, Jesus said, he prayed to the Father that this cup would pass from him. But he said, not as his will, but as thy will. So it was the Father's will that this was going to happen to Jesus, and Jesus accepted that. All right, and many, I was letting them know that according to the Word, his prayer was answered. Jesus is the resurrection. In the book of Matthew, verse, I think it's chapter 27 here, it says, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Jesus is the resurrection. He's yesterday, today, and forever. It's still going on today.
Still going on today.
Still going on.
Absolutely.
He is the resurrection.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, chapter 12 begins with the parable of the wicked vine dressers. We probably have time to read that. There's a lot to this, and we'll want to come back to it next week. But then he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a place for the wine vat, and built a tower. And he leased it to the vine dressers and went into a far country. Now at vintage time he sent a servant to the vine dressers that he might receive some of the fruit of the vineyard from the vine dressers. They took him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent them another servant, and at him they threw stones, wounded him in the head, and sent him away shamefully treated. And again he sent another, and they killed him and many others, beating some and killing some. Therefore, still having one son, his beloved, he also sent him to the last. He sent him to them last, saying, they will respect my son. But those vine dressers said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they took him and killed him and cast him out of the vineyard. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine dressers and give the vineyard to others. Have you not even read the scripture? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. You know, we can see, I think, the overall picture of what's being presented here. This is kind of a summary of the prophets coming and sending the Son. They're going to kill him. And I want to talk about verse 9. Give the vineyard to others. We'll do that next week.